Welcome back to the open letter to the President Obama with Shodan Sini. You mentioned new strategies, new rules of engagement, new breed of warriors and generals in this letter. What do you mean by these wars of cultural ideology?
Well, I recall I mentioned that at their essence, the war on drugs and the war on terror are really wars against ideologies, okay? Cultural ideologies. And you cannot win a war against a cultural ideology by bombing people or torturing them or shooting them. You just can't. Unless you're willing to commit genocide and kill everybody. Now, there's just too many of them. There's too many. So, there are too many people, communities, countries that are involved on, particularly the war on drugs. Too many interests within the United States themselves. So you can't win that war with violence. Now, we have to understand what the purpose of war is. The purpose of war is not to perpetuate itself. It has a way of wanting to do that, especially when you have an economy and a culture, a militaristic culture, which is the United States, and economy of war. Eisenhower warned us about this, back in the 50s. However, the purpose of war is to win a favorable peace. That is the purpose of war. You cannot win a favorable peace using violence when the nature of your enemy or the nature of the enmity you have with a group is fundamentally ideological. Now, the war on terror, why is it ideological? Well, because these countries have a certain segment of their population that want their religious ideology to prevail within their own boundaries, largely, but also to wherever those boundaries extend. Muslim communities in Europe, Muslim communities in the United States. That is just the nature of Islam. And anyone who tries to deny that is simply not familiar with the history of Islam. And there's no good saying, well, trying to emphasize the good parts of a religion and ignore the bad parts of a religion. It's like saying, okay, I have this individual and he's a firefighter or a surgeon or some kind of doctor, and Monday, Wednesday, and Friday he saves lives, but you know what, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sundays, he's a serial killer. So just because what he does on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, he's a good guy, so we're gonna forget and forgive what he does the rest of the week? No. Okay, so we have to look at religion in a very critical and objective manner and understand that, okay, war on terror is an ideological war, and you cannot win that war through violence alone. We have to attack the ideologies. We have to change what's in people's minds, the minds of the masses. We have to take the war we have to redefine the concept of war if we're going to win a favorable peace. Now, as far as the war on drugs, well, I remember many years ago, how long ago was this? Over 25 years ago, when I was working as an interpreter in Canada, and while I was doing first couple of degrees and honors degree and then a master's degree, and one of my part-time jobs was as an interpreter in Canadian prisons on their parole board for the RCMP sometimes, and one lawyer in particular. So I was working for the parole board and was living in Kingston, Ontario. Kingston, Ontario is renowned for both Queen's University and for being the prison capital of Canada. You've got maximum, medium, and minimum security prisons, federal prisons, and a couple of provincial institutions as well. But then one day, the parole board was comprised of people that went around Canada, different prisons, and so I pretty much knew them. Year after year, I would show up, and my job would be to prepare the inmate for what was expected of him, so they could present themselves in the best possible fashion for the parole, and really so they give the parole board an excuse to get them out of there and out of the Canadian taxpayer's pocket, really. Okay, so one day I'm finished. The hearing is over, and they asked me to stay if they could have a word with me, something to that effect. And I thought, oh crap, I'm in trouble now. But anyway, I said sure, and they said, well, we'd really like to ask you some questions. All right, I'll be happy to answer whatever questions. And they said, well, we don't understand. We don't understand why is it that we spend all this money on education, and they're a part of the war on drugs. We spend all this money, and we lock these people up, and we try to educate them, and all we have is more and more people coming in. Which was true, I knew, because I kept getting more and more business, right? I mean, I didn't do this for free, okay? So I get more and more business, and I remember clearly looking across the table, and they were all middle-aged white faces. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with middle-aged white faces, other than the fact that I asked myself, well, do I really want to tell them why? Or do I just gloss over and get the hell out of there? And then something in me decided I would just let them have it with both barrels. And I wrote about this somewhere on my writings. I redacted this whole experience, and basically what I said, you'll never win. And I gave them a summary of the history of Latin America, the history with contraband. And back in colonial times, Latin America was very much involved with contraband with North America, around their respective empires. The Latin Americans trying to avoid the Spanish crown, and the Americans trying to avoid the British crown. So contraband has been part of the culture of Latin America ever since there was a Latin America to have a culture. So ever since there was something that you could call Latin America, so Spain comes 1492, well, shortly after that there's contraband. Contraband is part of the culture, and contraband and secret societies and organized crime is part of Mediterranean culture. You know, mafias in Sicily and Palermo, okay, well, they were principalities of Spain, and Spain is very much steeped in, well, why do you think they have these corruption scandals? Okay, so I said, you'll never win. You can't win. You can't, it's not possible. Because, look, some of these people at the time, we're talking about the 80s, were given $14,000. $14,000 Canadian. At the time, the Canadian dollar and the American dollar were roughly the same. So $14,000, okay, just to make a drug run. And in most cases, to get caught. I mean, they're really when you look at their file, and you analyze. And then I was also working as interpreter for the RCMP and sometimes the FBI and the DEA, and so you look at their file and you go, okay, you really know what happened. This is the time when the Colombians were running the show before the Mexicans, and really they were given $14,000 that was going to go to their family if they just brought in this drugs. Now, $14,000 for those people at the time was a fortune. Okay, that was several times their income for a year. To do what? And what happens to them? They get caught. Their families get the money. They get locked up while they're being fed. They're learning English. They're learning a trade. So when they actually go back, when they go back to Colombia or Peru or Ecuador, I mean, there was virtually everybody was represented in Latin America. I had Cuban intelligence officers, Venezuelan naval intelligence. I had people all walks of life. Okay, were represented there of Latin America, and when they go back, they're more employable than before they left. So basically, they get paid to be trained. Okay? So I said, you're not going to win. You can't possibly win. And here we are, 20-some years later, and it's only gotten worse. We can't win this because it's a war against their culture, what's acceptable. And I said, furthermore, and this is something that really disturbed them, in the end, let me tell you this, in the end, they hate you. They hate you. They hate white people. They poison you for free. Now understand this. They would poison you for free, and they're getting paid for it. So from the perspective of Latin Americans, as far as Americans and Canadians are concerned, or just general white people, Europeans, They're happy to poison you, and you're paying them to poison you. So that's twice as happy. You think they care? They don't care. They don't care because they said, well, you know, we instruct them, we teach them on the damage they're doing to their society. I said, do you really think they care about the damage to their society, to your society? They don't care because they're living with, from their perspective, the damage that, and of course, people tend to, in Latin America, tend to put Canadians in the same boat as Americans. As far as they're concerned, they're living with the damage that American foreign policy has done to their society. So what do they care about? The damage that their product is doing to your society. They don't care. In fact, they celebrate this. And they're making money. You're so stupid that you pay them to poison. That you pay them to poison you. So you can't win. You can't possibly win. Okay? And that's just the bottom line. And that's the problem with not understanding cultural ideology. Now we're stuck in a situation that we can't win. There's no way that we'll run out of money. We'll run out of bullets. We'll run out of bombs. We'll run out of bulletproof vests. We're just going to run out of everything, and they'll never run out of cocaine and marijuana, etc. They won't. They won't run out of ingenious ways of beating our border patrol. Now these are people that they won't bother to create new industry. But here I have. I remember back then. The Colombians were creating these semi-submersible submarines. They were manufacturing them in the jungle. Okay, now these are people, they won't steal the formula for Coca-Cola and create their own Coca-Cola industry, but they'll put together a submarine in the jungle just to do something wrong. So that they'll engage their brain. Okay, so here I have an article which is what's the date on this? December 28th, I believe. It's narco drones. It's in Spanish. Narco drones developed by engineers of the UABC. This is a university of a Mexican-wide university, equivalent to California State or okay, Universidad Autónoma de Baja California. Okay, and so the DEA has warned the Mexican government that different drug cartels are using drones. Okay, to fly drugs into the United States, and they're hiring engineers trained at the UABC, the university. Okay, now, curiously, when I tried to get a fresh printout of the same article, it's been removed from the it's Reforma Mexico, which is a Mexican news agency, and curiously, it's been removed, so you can't find it anymore. I have a copy which I would cherish, but. Okay, so it's in the culture. So you can't possibly win. So Americans come over here, American officials come over here and think that they can coerce politicians to play the game. Okay, there's a book, I forget the name of the author, but the title is in Spanish, Los Señores del Narco, and she talks about Chapo Guzman. And essentially, the thesis of her book, she's a reporter. I don't know, maybe one of you can find, you know the name? Anabel Hernandez, okay? Just want to give credit to. What she says is, the drug lords, the people we identify as drug lords, they're not the lords, they're not the drug lords. The drug lords are the Mexican officials, politicians. Those are the drug lords. The Mexican politicians and established captains of industry. Those are the ones running the show. So this is just a farce in which Americans pour money in here and come in and they think they're going to coerce these politicians into accomplishing something for the benefit of the United States. It's just not going to happen. They're going to take their money from the Plan Merida, thank you very much, and most of that money is going to disappear. And what have we really advanced? What have we gained in the war on drugs? Nothing. We spent a lot of money, a lot of people have died, and we're stuck in this, and we can't go back. We're in a situation where we can't retreat because, like I said, the economic ties are too important now, so we can't pull back. And if we continue in this direction, we're going to sink ourselves. So we need to start thinking in different ways. We need to stop thinking that we can solve a problem that is that is based, steeped in cultural ideology. We have to stop thinking that we can win this with bullets and bombs. We can't. We need some brains and we need some balls. Otherwise, we're going to be dead.
Thank you. I also have something that you mentioned on page 13 on in this writing.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the death of democracy throughout most of the Hispanic world, together with the birth of a new form of government, mafiocracy.
Oh yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I'm very proud of that statement. Well, what's going on here? Now, this is part of the narco revolution. Remember, I mentioned that a revolution involves drastic, radical change on 3 levels, at least 3 levels: social, political, economic, and often religious. And there is religious change. I haven't mentioned it here, but there is a religious aspect to the narco revolution, and that is the religious movement that we we know as la Santa Muerte, which is actually a new religion, and it's being identified even by some of its senior exponents as a new religion. But that's for another point. So, what's going on with this? What's going on in terms? Why do I say the death of democracy? We're very simple. Now, the purpose of a democracy is that you have some kind of representation of the people in the government. So people decide, or the country decides who should represent them in government, so that their interests are being looked after. Okay, that's the essence of a democracy. You have the individuals who can vote, who have the right to vote, men, women over a certain age, 18, whatever, and they can vote, and so that their interests are represented in their government in some manner or shape. Now, what happens here with the narco revolution? What happens in a narco state? Well, they continue with the whole farce, but democracy becomes a farce. Democracy becomes a farce because you go through this show and the people elect somebody, but then those individuals, senators or presidents or Congress, whatever, mayors, governors, they're bought and sold to the drug cartels. So once they're in office, the only interest that they're looking out for are the people who purchase them, who purchase those interests. So you have a farce, which is called a democratic process, but really what's happening is the country is being run by cartels. So you no longer have a democracy, you have a mafiocracy. On the outside it looks like a democracy, but on the inside it's really the mafia. These drug cartels are running everything. That's why we have this whole scandal that took place recently with the president in Mexico. I won't go into detail about that.
Okay. So, what is, in this writing, what you mentioned, what is Chronicles of a Perfect Storm?
Okay, we have less than a minute for this segment. Oh, not even a minute. So we'll start the next segment with that very same question.